Welcome. It's so nice to meet you, Eleanor. This is the right way to say your name, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, lovely to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Do you want to start by sharing about your diagnosis, where do you live, and just any details that you want us to know?
Yeah, sure. So, I was diagnosed about 3.5 years ago with relapsing remitting MS. So that was in 2021 when I was 24. Um, and it kind of came after a couple of years of like weird symptoms, lots of pins and needles in my hands, in my feet. And then ultimately I had optic neuritis. So I went to the optician, and they referred me to the hospital and I kind of got diagnosed that way. Um, I had been kind of Googling my symptoms in between. So I think in my head I already kind of knew that I had MS, um, because I just kept getting all of these strange things, as I say, yeah, like the pins and needles. I also had this thing on my neck where I just kept waking up and like itching it really like aggressively, but there was nothing there. So yeah, all these strange things. I was Googling them and yeah, Dr. Google kept telling me that I had MS. So when my eyesight went a bit funny, I kind of added everything together and knew what to tell the optician and the doctor so that they then took the right steps to, referring me for an MRI scan, which then diagnosed me.
So you are actually helping the doctors, giving them the diagnosis.
Yeah, I think in a way, I'd been to my in the UK here we have GPs, so sort of just like a where you would go if you were sick, a doctor, and they just sort of kept fobbing me off, and they said I had a vitamin D deficiency, which now I know is can be a sign of MS, but it's not necessarily it's not the only sign of MS. Just because you have vitamin D deficiency doesn't mean you have MS. Um, so yeah, they just kind of kept fobbing me off and, giving me topical treatments for these things that I had. One time when I had like numbness in my feet, I went to the doctor and they were like, "Oh, you're wearing boots and they're too tight." So, that was their diagnosis. So yeah, eventually I kind of started joining up the dots and I knew what I was experiencing and it sounded like it was MS. So yeah, when I went to the hospital, when I went to the ophthalmologist at the hospital, I said to him, I get really tingly hands and feet as well. And he was like, okay, we'll refer you for an MRI. And I think they do see that quite a lot there because, yeah, people who have optic neuritis tend to go to the opticians or to the ophthalmologist. And then, yeah, they were sort of like, okay, we know what's going on.
When you heard the multiple sclerosis, were you scared or you?
Um, yeah. So I'd done a lot of research about it, which I think really helped. I think a lot of the time they say you don't Google your symptoms, but actually in my case, it helped me to understand that, it wasn't a death sentence, and I don't think it's the same diagnosis that people had years ago, when there wasn't things that could help. Um, so I was scared, but I was also quite relieved because I finally had answers as to why these strange things were happening. And it kind of in the run up to my diagnosis, various other things had been mentioned. Like there's and I hear this quite a lot, like, or it might be a brain tumor or something. So I think in a way I was almost relieved that it wasn't that. Um, but yeah, so I think the initial feeling was that of relief, but I think sort of later on I did kind of I started to come to terms with it and think, okay, this is forever and this is quite a big deal. But yeah, I think initially I was just kind of relieved that it wasn't something more sinister, and that I had done a lot of research on this thing, so I knew that there were things out there that could help me.
Yeah.
I had the appointment. I started off on a treatment plan, and it took me quite a long time to kind of go down to go on a different path away from that. But yeah, that's all sort of
What
part of the journey, I
what
guess.
made you shift from that path?
So I had started. I think you did an interview with Dr. Walls back in 2023. I know you've done a couple of interviews with her that I've seen. Yeah, Dr. Walls contacted me because she was doing a study and asked me to do an interview with her, which I did. And that kind of changed a lot for me. I was already aware of her story and it was something that I was definitely interested in. But I think when I was first diagnosed, it was something that was quite overwhelming to me. A lot was going on, a lot was changing, and I kind of just thought, I just want to take the drugs and see how I go. Um, so yeah, 2023, I did this interview with her, and after that, I decided that I was going to start making some changes to my diet specifically, and then hopefully, that would help me feel better, increase my energy, and I could make other changes as well. Um, so I started following more of like a paleo diet, and over time, well, not it happened quite quickly actually. I was sort of doing it gradually at first, and it just snowballed into like doing it all the time. And I was feeling really good. I was having loads of energy, and I was doing this all the time. And this went on for sort of a year and a bit that I was still on the medication, but I was doing the diet, and I was feeling really good. And it actually got to the point where the drugs, the side effects from the drugs were interfering with how good I was feeling from doing the diet changes. And so I spoke to my neurologist. I'd been really thinking about maybe I can come off medication. It's a strong medication that I'm on. I don't want to be on this forever. I had all of these thoughts going on in my head. Um, and I basically kept getting migraines from my medication. And my neurologist said, okay, we can switch you onto a different medication that might help with that. I knew I didn't want to take any like extra drugs for specifically for the migraines, but they were going to move me to a different MS treatment. And about a week before I was due to start that treatment, I'd had to have like a weaning off period where I was coming off my drugs. And I'd felt awful during this like weaning off period because my body was obviously thinking, where is the medication? And I just thought, I don't want to do this again. I'm gonna give it a go. I've made a lot of changes. I've been in therapy. I know a lot more about myself. I've made a lot of diet changes. I also did a health coaching course, so I knew a lot about how my body was working or what was going on, and I just kind of took that as a sign that I was ready to stop my medication. And so that's what I did. I messaged my neurologist and said I've actually decided I want to have a break. Um, and I was really scared about what she was going to say. Um,
We are all scared of what other people are going to say, and especially a doctor, instead of just trusting ourselves. But you listen to your gut and the sign. I'm very impressed.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. And, I just kept saying to myself, because it was scary. I was scared of what my doctor was going to say. Also, like my family and my loved ones, they were a bit like, what are you doing? And I just had to say, like, this is how I feel. I'm feeling really good now. And I feel like I've made enough changes to know myself and know what I need to do to help myself. And so yeah, that was what happened.
Can you share some of the changes that you made? I don't,
hmm Other than diet, was that, sorry?
yeah.
Yeah, so with the from doing the diet, I had a lot more energy. And I've just put that into like I love being outside now. Before I was inside all the time, never wanted to go outside. I go outside all the time. This is a bit extreme, but we'd bought a dog so that I would go out and walk more. So I have to get up and walk the dog. And that has been a really big shift actually because it would take me that to actually, get up in the morning and think, right, I've got to go outside and have a walk because he needs to have a walk in the morning. So, yeah, I've done that. Like I mentioned, I've been in therapy. I've addressed a lot of different things in therapy and stress. I really try and manage my stress. Um, I try and do some lower level exercises like yoga and Pilates. Um, yeah, they just yeah.
Stress contributed to your symptoms?
Massively. I think stress is a huge trigger for me. And I think it impacts us all, but I think that that was a really big thing for me to understand how I respond to stress, and how I don't want to say cause myself stress, but
We all do.
do, yeah. Yeah, and how I was dealing with things. I was, I learned a lot on my course about the link between autoimmune diseases and stress, and things like the fight or flight response. And I realized that fight or flight is something that I've been stuck in for like a very long time. And so trying to, bring myself out of that state and reassure myself. I talk to myself quite a lot, which is sounds a bit funny, but yeah, reassuring myself and just, sitting with feelings and emotions more and just allowing myself to process things as well has really been a big game changer, I think.
Yes, I understand that. And I don't think it's weird talking to ourselves because somebody is there to listen. So,
Yeah, exactly.
can you share one myth about MS that you wish people know about?
Just that it doesn't have to stop you. It doesn't I actually think that my MS has opened doors for me, that it's changed me for the better, and it hasn't stop it stopped me in a way of it's made me stop and think and look at life and look at the world in a completely different light. I guess anybody that's newly diagnosed, I just want to kind of send them the message that this isn't necessarily a really bad thing, and it can be a struggle sometimes because you're constantly learning and slowing things down and thinking about things, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing.
I think that's beautiful because that's very important to just slow down and appreciate. And I feel the same way. MS taught me more about life than I learned in my 30 years of trying to figure it out. Um, do you have any symptoms, or when you do, what do you do about them?
So I do occasionally still get tingling in my hands. Usually that's like a sign for me to like go to bed because I'm tired. And that's how I take it, is like, oh, my body's telling me I need to go to sleep. Um, yeah, I do still get some headaches sometimes. I don't know if they're generally linked to MS. It's a bit of a blurry line, because I've just had headaches my whole life. But generally, I just, take these things as a sign to slow down, and kind of evaluate what it is that my body needs. Is it water? Is it food? Is it rest? Do I need to go outside and get some fresh air? Yeah, just really kind of listening to what my body's telling me through these messages.
Did you do that before?
Not really, no.
Yes, it's very important to do that, and I do the same. I every time if I feel something is going on, I don't take it as like, okay, keep pushing through. I take it as a sign that it's time to rest and time to think what I eat or what caused it, instead of just like taking an Advil and
Yeah.
moving on. How do you handle stress these days from friends, family? Do you feel like everybody has an opinion about your diagnosis and how you should take care of yourself?
I am lucky in that my kind of closest friends and family are very good, and they might not always understand exactly what's going on with me, but I would say they trust me enough to know that I know what's going on. Stress, I'm quite good with boundaries now. That's another thing that I've learned in therapy is I think before I was big on people pleasing and kind of living my life not really for me. So that's something that I've worked on a lot, implementing boundaries, not doing things that I either don't want to do, don't have the capacity or the energy for. I'm quite good at saying no now, which I never was before. Um, so yeah, I think that's how I deal with stress mainly, and just sort of coming back to myself as well, and just, asking myself questions like, does this matter? Is this important? Um, yeah.
It's so interesting. I got this book for my children, and it's about a karate teacher teaching meditation, and he's teaching the students the same thing, like ask yourself questions. How do you feel? Is it useful? Is this thoughts gonna help you? What you should do about it? So instead of just reacting, like find out what you really need to do, and just by thinking about it, it just gives you the answer without making the wrong choice first, because we tend to always pick the wrong one sometimes. Do you feel like therapy or diet was the most helpful for you?
It's very hard to say, really, because I kind of did both of them alongside each other. And I still, I've been with my therapist for like over 2.5 years now, and I don't see myself ever stopping seeing him, to be honest. I think that it's really good to have like a space where I can vent and like figure stuff out, in a room with somebody who doesn't have any, external opinions or anything like that. So I do find that really useful. And I think that the therapy work that I've done has been a massive part of the journey. But I do think that diet has played a big part as well. Um, so I'd say they're probably the two biggest ones for me. It's hard to say which one might be more, but I think yeah, they're definitely probably the two biggest things.
I've been seeing a therapist probably since my diagnosis, and I actually started before my diagnosis because I felt very anxious, and my husband told me that it's time to see a therapist. And me coming from a third world country where you don't see therapists, you don't have money for therapists, there are no therapists. For me to actually go and sit with one, I just felt like silly. I thought I can figure my things out, but it helped me the most. That also helped me, but therapist was just life-changing. And I'm joking with my therapist this day. I tell her that I'm using her as my life coach now. I don't need therapist anymore, but I still do. So it's I recommend having a therapist for everybody. Do you have any fear about the future, or what are your plans? How are you planning to manage this disease?
I guess in a way, sometimes I do worry about, the future, but I try and just stay present, really. And I think that's, a lot of the work that I've done in therapy and mindfulness and things, just trying to work with what I've got at the moment and, appreciate where things are at the moment too. Um, yeah, I haven't really thought that far ahead. I think in terms of diet, there are always things that come up, I guess, like holidays. Christmas was a big one because there's always so much, chocolate and sweets around. Um, but it's just, yeah, I work on kind of everything in moderation and also kind of again coming back to that mindfulness, something that's really worked for me in terms of diet has been, how are you going to feel if you did eat loads of chocolate on Christmas Day? How are you going to feel later? And because I'm so aware of how I feel after I've put things into my body, I often, I'm not tempted by it because I think, oh, it's not worth it for me. So yeah, I think as long as I can keep going with that mindfulness and, slowing down, asking myself these questions, then hopefully that will be enough. And if it's not, then I'll cross that bridge when I get to it.
That I like that approach. I see a lot of people overstressing, and I was one of them, like overstressing about the future and try to figure it out now, what the future looks like or feels like, but instead of just being present and enjoy the present. So you are very brave doing that. Do you think sugar or gluten is worse for you?
I think that sugar is worse for me and my symptoms. I notice it a lot more. I get a lot of tingling in my hands if I have like refined sugar anyway. Like if I'm having fruit, then it's fine. But yeah, refined sugar really sort of puts me into a bit of a flare. Um, but yeah, gluten, I can't. I think the less I've had it as well, the more I react when I do have it. I've noticed. So yeah, I do try and steer clear from both of them as much as I can.
Right. So my question is, what made you decide that you want to share your story in this new video series?
I just think that when I've looked before, there's not been a massive amount of people, sharing what we're sharing, and I've sort of found myself in a world of people that are kind of doing it more holistically and naturally dealing with their diagnosis. But I still, we are still the minority, and it's not something that was even mentioned to me by my doctor. And I think the more that we can talk about it and raise awareness of doing it this way, it just gives people more options because I think you can feel really stuck. And like I felt so stuck being on medication and still feeling really ill. But all my MRIs were coming back stable. So the doctor was like, oh, you're doing fine. But I didn't feel fine. And I just think there is more out there that you can do to get yourself to feeling fine, where you're living a good quality of life. And that's so important because if we don't have that, it really can harm our mental health and all sorts of things. So, yeah, I just think it's really important to speak about it because it's not spoken about enough.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, so the book that we published was, I don't think anybody in the book is on medication, but this video series, I kind of wanted to show both sides. Some people are gonna have, they are on medication and some not. So my question is, do you feel better right now? Do you comparing your symptoms versus when you were on medication, or do you think the medication actually stopped your MS progression but gave you additional symptoms, side
It
effects?
Yeah, it's hard to say. So I definitely feel better now that I'm off the medication because I'm not getting the migraines that I was getting. And they were kind of really impacting a lot of areas of my life, like my work. I can't, I sit at a computer desk, so I can't work if I have a migraine. And just, social life things. It was really starting to affect my life. Um, and now I don't really get that. So I do feel a lot better without the medication. But at the same time, I don't know, obviously, what would have happened if I never started the medication. And it could be that part of the reason that my MS is in remission now is partly down to the medication, kind of kicking it and putting it in place, and now I'm able to maintain that. Which my doctor said that that could happen. There's not a massive amount of research on it, but that could be part of it. So yeah, and I mean, I've said to a lot of people as well, if I was, if something was to happen and my MS was to become active again, it's not that I'm against the medication. I do think that it has a place. It's just that that wasn't right for me at the time. And right now I'm on this journey and I'm seeing what happens from doing this.
Thank you for sharing that. Do you feel like you changed spiritually since your diagnosis?
Yeah, I do a lot. I think just I just feel more connected to the world and to nature and yeah, just the universe in general, to be honest. I don't think I was very connected at all before. And I kind of just tried to live like a very fast-paced hustle and bustle life. And it was just sort of passing me by, really. I wasn't stopping to do anything. Now I've found a love for gardening, which I never knew I had. So
Just
yeah,
like me, actually.
yeah. And I love it. I feel so much better for it. Yeah, so yeah, I think definitely is the answer.
And do you feel like there was a reason why you had to get MS or why you had got this diagnosis to slow?
Yeah. I do. I think that was my my message to slow down. And I think I really tried to fight it in the beginning. And now I've kind of come to learn that my body couldn't cope with the way that I was treating it, with the way that, I was going about my life. And that was it screaming out to me, telling me that I needed to change something. And it took quite a lot for me to listen to that, but that is what I needed. And I'm so glad that I have listened and I'm 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 still listening, because I think my life is so much better.
So what do you think your future looks like?
Um, Hopefully just continuing down this path of eating good food, having energy so that I can see my friends and my family, um, doing my gardening. I'm planning a vegetable patch this season, so hopefully growing some vegetables if it's successful. Yeah, and just continuing on this like slow, um, mindful life.
I like that word. Are you part of any MS communities?
So I'm part of a group on Facebook called MS Together. And I think they're a UK group for young people who have MS. And uh, I joined them quite early on in my diagnosis. I think it was literally like a week after I was diagnosed. I was looking for people in similar situations. They're a very supportive group. And people ask all sorts of questions and somebody's always there to answer. So that's really nice. I also built up my own page on Instagram about a year after I was diagnosed. I started that, just sharing my experiences. It has now turned into my health coaching page because that's what I do now. But it's kind of still relevant because the people that I help are people like me with autoimmune diseases. Um, so yeah, I have a community there that's really nice as well.
I love that. I love that something so terrible like an MS diagnosis turned into something that you actually helping people, and that's my path also. It's interesting. Who is your biggest inspiration in this community, and any books you can recommend or helped you on your journey?
Um, so I think obviously Dr. Wall's her story is incredible. And anyone who hasn't read it, I would really recommend to go and read her book. Um, I have got your book, your Beating MS book. Funnily enough, when I was going through the whole thing where I decided I was coming off treatment, my mum was quite worried. She was quite anxious about it. And I have lent her your book because I wanted her to be able to read stories of people that had, gone the medication-free route and um had been successful with it. And I think that was really good that I was able to share that with her to help reassure her. And I think she was really appreciative of that. So thank you to you and everyone whose stories are in that book because you really helped sort of reassure my mum when we were going through that.
Thank you. And I'm sure with this sharing your story here and online, and you're helping so many people. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else you would like to add before we finish?
A message to anybody who's watching this. I just want to encourage people to go with their gut feelings and to not be afraid to do something that might seem a little bit different or a little bit out there. Um, you know yourself better than anyone else. So if you're feeling like you want to do something, not necessarily coming off medication, but you want to make diet changes or whatever, then what have you got to lose?